What's up, Vikings Nation? The 2026 NFL Combine is officially underway in Indianapolis, and the Minnesota Vikings are already making moves behind the scenes that could shape the future of this franchise. We're not just talking about 40-yard dashes and vertical jumps, we're talking about meetings, strategy, and the blueprint for the next era in Minnesota. Here's the teaser. Several names have already surfaced as prospects the Vikings have reportedly met with, and some of them could directly impact massive roster questions, including life after Harrison Smith and long-term defensive upgrades. And trust me, some of these meetings are more strategic than they look at first glance. Today, we're diving deep into every reported Vikings meeting at the 2026 NFL Combine. Who are they targeting? What does it tell us about the draft strategy? And which of these players could realistically be wearing purple next season? Let's break down these Minnesota Vikings news together. The NFL Combine is more than workouts, it's chess, not checkers. While fans focus on bench press reps and 40 times, front offices are locked in hotel rooms conducting formal and informal meetings that often determine draft boards. This is where trust is built, personalities are evaluated, and red flags are uncovered. For the Vikings, who currently hold pick number 18 in the first round, these conversations are critical. With Brian Flores continuing to shape this defense and long-term roster planning in motion, every meeting matters, especially at positions like safety, cornerback, and defensive tackle. So as we go through these names, remember, meetings don't guarantee selections, but they absolutely signal interest, and sometimes they reveal exactly what a team is planning before anyone else sees it coming. Let's start with one of the biggest names linked to Minnesota so far, Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. If you've been following Vikings coverage closely, you already know this name has been circulating heavily in draft conversations. Thieneman starred at Purdue before transferring to Oregon and continued to show high-level range, versatility, and playmaking ability. He's the type of rangy safety who can rotate, disguise coverage, and thrive in Brian Flores' aggressive defensive system. Here's the big question. Is he worth pick number 18? Because based on projections, he's unlikely to fall into the middle of the second round. If the Vikings see him as the heir apparent to Harrison Smith, this meeting becomes extremely significant. Now let's talk value strategy. If Minnesota decides to wait on safety, another reported meeting was with Bud Clark from TCU, and this one is fascinating for different reasons. Clark is an older prospect who spent 6 seasons at TCU, but production is production. Over the past 4 years, he recorded 15 interceptions, the most in the country during that span. That's not a fluke. That's ball skills and instincts. He also confirmed that he had a formal meeting with the Vikings this week. That detail matters. Formal meetings are scheduled, intentional, and structured. If Minnesota waits until day 2, Clark could be a very logical target. Now shifting to the cornerback position, Chris Johnson out of San Diego State is another name connected to the Vikings during Combine Week. And Vikings fans know cornerback depth is always a discussion. Johnson reportedly had the highest PFF grade among draft-eligible corners last season. He's smooth in transition, fluid in coverage, and recorded 4 interceptions in 2025. That's the type of efficiency Flores loves in defensive backs. A second-round corner with elite grading metrics? That screams scheme fit. If the Vikings are building a long-term secondary foundation, this meeting absolutely tracks with what we've seen from the front office. Let's move inside to the defensive line. DeMonte Capehart from Clemson reportedly met with Minnesota, and while he's not projected as a first-rounder like his teammate Peter Woods, he's an intriguing developmental piece. Capehart spent 6 years at Clemson and brings size, experience, and interior disruption. Over the last 3 seasons, he totaled 9.5 tackles for loss and 5 batted passes, showing flashes of impact inside. He reportedly ran an unofficial 4.85 in the 40-yard dash. For a defensive tackle, that kind of movement ability adds intrigue. Day 3 target? Possibly. But depth in the trenches is never a bad investment. Now let's talk offense for a moment. Jacoby Lane from USC. At first glance, wide receiver might not seem like a pressing need for the Minnesota Vikings, but roster dynamics can shift quickly. If Jalen Nailor departs in free agency, suddenly that WR3 competition becomes real. Lane was USC's #2 receiver behind projected first-rounder Mekhi Lemon and caught 12 touchdowns as a sophomore in 2024. He's got size, red zone ability, and developmental upside. This feels like a mid-round meeting designed to gather intel in case the board falls a certain way. Staying on offense, Emmett Johnson from Nebraska is another very interesting name, especially when you think long-term at running back. Johnson piled up over 1,800 yards from scrimmage with 15 touchdowns last season. That's serious production. And if the Vikings are considering eventual succession planning at the position, a third-round running back becomes realistic. What makes this storyline even better? He's a Minneapolis native. Drafting a hometown player with production and upside? That's the kind of move that energizes a fan base instantly. Now here's something important. Not every reported meeting is fully confirmed by video evidence. Some reports come from insiders, social media, or secondary sources. So while we're tracking all of these names, we have to acknowledge that not every conversation is guaranteed. That said, smoke often leads to fire during Combine Week. The key takeaway isn't certainty, it's pattern recognition. And right now, the pattern suggests the Vikings are heavily focused on secondary reinforcements and defensive depth. Let's zoom out for a second. Safety, cornerback, defensive tackle, wide receiver, running back. What does that tell us about Minnesota's priorities? It suggests a team preparing for transition at certain veteran spots while also reinforcing competitive depth. It suggests long-term planning, not just immediate plug-and-play drafting. And most importantly, it shows that the Minnesota Vikings are actively doing their homework at premium and rotational positions alike. Now I want to hear from you, Vikings fans. If pick number 18 comes down to Dylan Thieneman or the best corner on the board, what are you doing? Are you prioritizing a Harrison Smith successor? Or are you doubling down on secondary versatility for Brian Flores' system? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this debate is just getting started. And what about running back? Would you pull the trigger on Emmett Johnson in the third round if he's there? Or are you comfortable rolling with the current room another year? These are the kinds of decisions that define draft classes. And combined meetings are often the first breadcrumb trail that leads to those big moments in April. One thing is clear, the Vikings are being intentional. They're targeting playmakers, versatile defenders, and productive offensive weapons. That aligns perfectly with the competitive identity they're building. As more meetings get reported throughout Combine Week, we'll continue tracking everything related to Vikings and Minnesota Vikings news so you stay ahead of the curve. Because that's what we do here, we break it down, we analyze it, and we talk through it like true fans who live and breathe purple football. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 2026 NFL Combine meetings, make sure to smash that like button so more Vikings fans find this channel. Subscribe so you don't miss any breaking Noticias dos Minnesota Vikings news, especially as draft rumors heat up over the next few weeks. And share this video with your fellow Vikings faithful, because the road to the draft just got very, very interesting. Skol.